Elvis Presley's whirlwind rise to fame took an unexpected turn in early 1956. Just months after his breakthrough, he was already exhausting his newfound success. After fleeing his previous temporary homes, Elvis found himself at yet another new place, but this time it was different. Unlike the quick turnover of previous rentals, this new home promised stability. Yet his time there was brief, marked by constant movement and an escalating fan frenzy. In those days, Elvis was on the road almost non-stop. He played sold-out shows in big venues across the South and Mid-Atlantic regions. These weren't small towns or local clubs, they were large municipal auditoriums that could hold thousands. Elvis was the headliner, drawing crowds that went wild with excitement. His new RCA records were climbing the charts fast, and TV appearances made him even more popular. By late spring, Time and Newsweek magazines were talking about him, signaling a new era in pop culture. At concerts, the atmosphere was electric. Fans screamed so loudly, the musicians struggled to hear themselves. Scotty Moore, Elvis's guitarist, described it as being in a sea of sound. The intensity was overwhelming, with the crowd's energy dictating the pace of the performances. For Elvis, it was like navigating through a storm of noise, relying solely on his movements to guide the band. Behind the scenes, Colonel Parker was in full control, managing every detail of the tour. He decided everything from the opening acts, no longer musicians who might distract from Elvis, to the design of the posters. The business side was becoming more rigorous, yet it was all part of propelling Elvis's career forward. Parker kept the earnings high for himself and his team, including Elvis and drummer DJ Fontana, who were paid modestly but kept on board because of their connection to the star. With Elvis's popularity soaring, Parker increased the fees for TV appearances and pushed harder for a Hollywood contract. This move was not just about money, it was about transforming Elvis into a full-fledged movie star. A turning point came when film producer Hal Wallis, impressed by Elvis's performance on The Dorsey Show, agreed to let him come to Los Angeles for a screen test. Wallis saw Elvis as a magnet for teenagers, a demographic major studios were targeting for a new genre of films known as teen pics. Elvis's screen test was a mix of drama, lip-syncing, and dancing to his own songs. Though he didn't impress Wallis with his acting skills, his charisma was undeniable. When he performed Blue Suede Shoes, the effect was immediate. The room buzzed with energy, confirming Elvis's potential as a movie star. However, the question remained whether his screen charisma could translate into roles that went beyond his teenage fan base, much like Bing Crosby had done. For now, Elvis signed a contract with Wallis in Paramount Pictures. It was a one-picture deal with room for up to 6 more films, each paying more. The contract also allowed Elvis to do one film a year with another studio, if Wallis didn't offer a comparable deal. Colonel Parker was a master strategist, ensuring Elvis remained in high demand by avoiding long-term commitments. Elvis's next move was a bold one. Parker arranged for him to perform in Las Vegas, a gamble given the audience there was not typically his teen fan base. Despite initial nerves, Elvis thrived in the city's vibrant atmosphere. He spent his free time soaking up the city life, meeting celebrities, and discovering new music. Las Vegas became one of his favorite places to unwind, though he quickly realized he'd return there often. Back on the entertainment circuit, Elvis's TV appearances on Milton Berle's show further boosted his visibility. The performances were confident and energetic, showcasing his growth as a performer. With each step, Elvis was becoming more than just a singing sensation. He was a cultural phenomenon, setting the stage for a career that would redefine pop music and film. As Elvis's fame grew, so did the expectations and pressures around him. Yet in the midst of all this, he remained grounded, driven by a passion for music and the thrill of the spotlight. The road ahead would bring more challenges and changes, but for now, Elvis was living the dream, one performance at a time. After Elvis's second appearance on Ed Sullivan's show, things got really heated. People who wrote for big newspapers in New York were especially upset. They said Elvis's dancing was too sexy for TV. They thought his moves were for places like seedy bars, not family-friendly shows. They didn't like how he moved his legs and hips while singing. These critics didn't just stop at Elvis's dance moves, they also said he couldn't really sing. A writer from the New York Times said Elvis didn't have any good singing skills. This kind of talk wasn't just about Elvis, it was about rock and roll as a whole. Many people, including famous singers like Frank Sinatra, thought rock and roll was bad. Sinatra said it sounded fake and was bad for young people. He thought the music and the singers were causing trouble. To many people back then, these criticisms might seem extreme. But they showed a big worry: rock and roll was changing how young people acted and thought. Critics linked rock and roll to delinquency, a word for being a troublemaker. They said this music was bad for kids, even though crime rates weren't actually higher than before. To understand why this caused such a fuss, we need to look back at how teenagers used to be. For most of history, kids stayed close to their families and communities. They didn't really find their own group until they were older. Schools didn't separate kids by age much, and many young people worked to help their families. Money was tight, so kids usually stayed in school longer and depended on their families. But after World War II, things changed. More kids stayed in high school, thanks to better money for families and new schools that grouped kids by age. This meant teenagers had more time together, away from adults. A new teen culture started to form, especially among working-class kids who influenced how their middle-class friends acted too. This shift was partly because of big changes in how kids lived. After the war, many families had more money, thanks to jobs and government programs. Kids had more free time, and some could even save money of their own. For the first time, companies started making stuff just for teenagers, like clothes and music. This made teens feel more like a separate group from adults. By the time Elvis came along in the mid-1950s, this new teen culture was taking off. Kids from all walks of life were connecting over music, clothes, and a sense of independence. Elvis was a big part of this. His music and dance moves captured the spirit of this new teen world, but not everyone was happy about it. Many older people, including famous actors and musicians, were scared by these changes. They thought rock and roll and its stars were bad influences on young people. This fear wasn't just about music, it was about a whole new way of being young. Teenagers were starting to see themselves as a unique group, separate from kids and adults. This was new and a bit scary for those who remembered a time when youth meant being closely tied to family and community. The debate over rock and roll and Elvis was really about more than just music. It was about change and how to handle it. In the 1950s, a big shift happened in how young people lived their lives. This change was not just about music or clothes. It was about how teenagers wanted to express themselves and find their independence. This new youth culture was very different from what older generations, especially parents, were used to. Back then, the focus was on family and following rules. But now, young people wanted to enjoy life more and make their own choices. Parents were worried. They thought this new way of life was dangerous. They believed the media, like movies and music, was making their kids rebellious and disrespectful. This worry grew because after World War II, America had a lot of money but also fears about communism. People thought that if youth weren't careful, they could be easily influenced by bad ideas. Rock and roll music became a big part of this tension. It was exciting and new, but it mixed different music styles and cultures. This was alarming to many adults. They saw it as a threat because the music was popular among young people from different backgrounds, including black and white teens. This mixing of cultures was seen as dangerous, especially in the South where racial segregation was still strong. Adults were particularly upset because rock and roll was associated with black culture. They feared it would lead young people to reject traditional values. Some even thought it could weaken support for white supremacy, which was a big fear, especially in regions fighting against the civil rights movement. To deal with this, record companies started making cleaner versions of rock and roll songs. They had white singers cover songs originally by black artists, trying to make the music more acceptable. But this didn't stop teenagers from enjoying the real thing. DJs like Alan Freed kept playing the original songs, and they became even more popular. Despite efforts to tone it down, rock and roll continued to grow. By 1956, it was taking over the music scene. New artists, both black and white, started combining different music styles to create something fresh and exciting. They made music that appealed to everyone, regardless of race. This led to more integrated shows where black and white musicians performed together or in front of mixed audiences. This change was scary for many adults. They worried that young people emulating black culture could lead to a decline in respect for traditional values. The idea of different races mixing and enjoying the same music challenged long-held beliefs about keeping races separate. This was especially true in the South, where the fight against racial segregation was gaining momentum. In the end, the youth culture of the 1950s was more than just music and fashion. It was about freedom and self-expression. Though it caused fear and conflict with older generations, it paved the way for greater acceptance and change. The struggle between old values and new ideas set the stage for the significant social movements of the following decades. This period showed that the voices of young people were powerful and could not be ignored.